Welcome back. We continue with our special coverage of the U.S. elections. And we now speak to Naomi Tutu, the daughter of the late struggle stalwart and Nobel Peace Prize winner Archbishop Desmond Tutu. She'll share her experience on the polls as she is in the United States. From our side, a good evening to you. And thank you so much for joining us. I believe you also very much a participant in this year's election in the U.S.
Well, I'm not as much of a participant as I've been in past elections, because past elections I've actually been a poll worker. But this time I decided that I did not have the energy to be working at the polls. But I have voted, yes.
Okay, and talk to me about the experience. One of the things that, you have quite a rich history, right? The daughter of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, also voting and a citizen of the U.S., and this mix of heritage and experience. And for many South Africans, we've been watching really in just how the electoral system also works in the U.S., the early voting that is taking place over, 70 million votes that have been cast before the actual day. So explain to us, the moments that stand out about this particular period, the actual participating in that election, and lessons that South Africa can learn from the execution.
Yes, and definitely, I mean, early voting is, for me, one of the blessings of this life. I always vote early. I was in Palestine when early voting started in Georgia, but as soon as I got back, the very first thing I did was the next morning to go and vote, because early voting actually is an easier way of voting than actual polling day. They have made it increasingly difficult, particularly in Black communities, for people to vote in places like Georgia. So on election day, you can only vote in the assigned polling station that is on your voter registration. Whereas on early voting, you can vote at any of the early voting stations. So that makes it easier for first of all, for poll workers, because then you can vote before so that you can be at your polling station all day. And it makes it easier for people like me who travel a lot. So I'm on my way out of town today, and looking at my polling station, there was quite a big turnout for polling. So I think that early voting is a great invention, and maybe South Africa could put that in place. And also mail votes. So for us South Africans living outside of the country, that we have limited access to polling places in order to vote, and we can only vote on voting days. So if we had an option for mail-in ballots, that would allow us to keep involved and part of the system much easier in South Africa as the diaspora.
Yeah, really something to think about, right? And just fascinating to watch how this election is playing out. Of course, some concerns around which you mentioned in Georgia. And we do have a reporter on the ground there keeping a close eye on things. It's very difficult to speak to you without mentioning just the impact that your father had on the democracy that we have here in South Africa. And I think, many having said that, this election in 2024 was a maturing of that democracy. I wonder if the same can be said as we watch the quality of the debate, the argument in the U.S. If you watch the campaign of this election and say, this is a maturing democracy.
I don't know whether we would call it maturing, because I think that the level of election rhetoric, particularly from the Republican candidate, has been, in fact, a deterioration of the type of discussion, debate, electioneering that we would expect from a democracy that holds itself up as one of the examples of democracy in the world. That it has been actually quite distressing to be following this election, and the rhetoric has been almost gutter level. The insulting of candidates, of election blocks. I mean, it has been hard to watch, and I think that, as in South Africa, we have said that this year's election was a maturing of our democracy. I think that in the US, that when people say that this election is going to be a determinant whether democracy continues to be the model in the US, is a level of a truism, but is in fact, I think it is a reality that, you know, the candidate on the Republican side has shown us what he is willing to do to undermine democracy. So that January 6th, this continuing claim that the election was stolen from him, even after has had court case after court case thrown out, even by judges that he appointed. So it is clear that we are actually probably facing a time when we have to question whether democracy is actually safe in this country.
Sure, that's a lot to think about, right? We're getting reports of, you know, at this moment, things looking quite peaceful in many parts of the US, but a lot of talk around fear where this election is concerned. I mean, for you, what is the greatest fear? Is there a sense that if one of the candidates, and of course we can imagine which one that would be, is dissatisfied with the results here, that there could be a January 6th or instability in the US? And if you're seeing people starting to prepare for that or think about that or talk about it?
So, I mean, for me, so as I said, I worked as a poll worker in previous elections here. And I think one of the fears for me is that most of the people who work in polling stations are women and elderly people, the people who have the time on their hands, if you like, because if you're working at the polling stations, you need to report by 6 a.m. and you're expected to stay until 9 p.m. And so that's a whole day that people are asked to give up. And so workers tend to be women and then the elderly. And we have already seen instances of violence against polling workers. And so that, for me, is one of the great concerns. And I was happy to see that they have stepped up security at polling stations around me. But that people have that level of disrespect for people who, I mean, the pay that they give you for working in the polling stations is not going to make you a millionaire, okay? And so that people are really volunteering their time because they care about democracy.
Yeah.
So that, for me, has been a source of fear. And yes, as you say, then the other is again, Donald Trump has let us know that if he is not satisfied with the outcome, that he is willing to consider taking action. And given what the action that he encouraged after the last election on the January the 6th, then of course we have to be concerned about the possibility of even more violence this time around. And I worked as an election observer at our first democratic election in South Africa, and was aware of many white South Africans who had stocked up with food and all the rest of it, that they had been told that there might be mayhem after this election. And I have to say that I haven't seen that level of people preparing in the communities that I know, that there has not been stocking up of food. We still have on the grocery shelves, because we've seen when people have decided that they need to stock up for an emergency, that grocery shelves are emptied of food, water, toilet paper, paper towels, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was in my grocery store today and haven't seen that kind of stocking up.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for that perspective, and certainly the reflection on the comparison, right, of our various, our two democracies. Thank you so much. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Enjoy watching those numbers coming in as well. That there, the one and only Naomi Tutu, who is, of course, you remember her very, very well. She is the daughter of the late Desmond Tutu, talking to us about her experience of voting in this all-important US election. Okay.